Well, hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. This is Garrett here with 11 Bang Bang. You might have noticed we haven't uploaded anything in almost 2 weeks now. Well, there's a few reasons for that. Number one being Ethan's been away with the National Guard doing National Guardy things. And the other thing was we've been working on a project, Caleb and I. We are at this moment trying to figure out how to run our new camera, hopefully get a little more quality on the channel. Alright, I want to tell you about a new project we're working on here. What we have here is a Traditions. You can't see that, I'll hold it up. Traditions 1851 brass frame Navy 36 caliber. And what we're going to do with this gun is we're going to convert it to a true Griswold and Gunnison, which we're going to actually do kind of a hybrid of first and second model. We're copying this picture right here. I'll show you what this barrel originally looked like. Give me that, Patterson. This is a Pieta, by the way. Traditions. This is probably the cheapest brass frame cap and ball revolver you can get. It runs about 170 bucks. This is the way the barrel originally looked. You can see that octagon on this Patterson. And you might say, well, why are you running a perfectly good gun? Well, this gun has some issues. It tends to over rotate. We got to fix that. Like I said, it's a very cheap version of the gun. I've had this gun for a long time. I have about 3,000 rounds through it. And I don't know, we have enough 51 Navies around here to choke a cow. We have 4 at the moment. 4 Navy revolvers. We have a 44, we have a Sheriff's model, we have a Pieta, we have a Uberti, and we have this brass frame gun. So we are going to attempt to turn this into a Griswold and Gunnison. Now, like I said, first thing we have to do to make a true Griswold and Gunnison, which is not quite what like Pieta sells as their Griswold and Gunnison copy. First of all, we have to take the octagon off. And the second model Griswold and Gunnison will still have the octagon up here at the front of the barrel. So we're going for that there. The second thing you have to do is completely remove the cylinder seam, and we're going to do that on the drill press over there. Actually, we will mount this to a bolt and we will spin it on the drill press and just sand that seam right off. Then the third thing you have to do to make this just like the one in the picture is we're going to shorten the trigger and flatten the bottom of the trigger guard at a certain angle. And that's one thing that the Pieta, Griswold, and Gunnison still don't get right. And last but definitely not least, in order to make a Griswold and Gunnison look right, you have to take this back strap and bend it ever so slightly out so that it looks like you've whacked somebody with it. It's not much of a bend if you go look at the original pictures, but there is a little bit of a bend, so we're going to attempt to do that. That might require us heating, annealing, and completely redoing the mainspring. It's no big deal. We work on springs like that all the time. We have access to a pretty good machine shop. And the very last thing that we're going to have to do is I highly doubt after we bend it that these original grips are going to fit. So we are going to wind up making a new set of grips from walnut, because that's, to the best of my knowledge, what the original guns had for grips. We'll probably do it straight from a dead tree, and we'll show you all that. We've done it before. Anyway, first step in the process, disassemble the gun, which it's mostly disassembled already. And disassemble the action, because you don't want... We're going to wind up soaking these blued parts in vinegar to remove all the bluing, because we're going for an antique finish on this gun. By the way, I don't know if you can make it out there, we did leave just a little bit of octagon on the end of that, just enough so you can see the P. Now, I don't think this is going to turn out perfect anyway, but should it turn out really good, I don't want anyone to say we're trying to make a fake. So you can still see the P for Pieta right there on the end of that octagon. We left just enough for that. So like I said, we're going to strip this down, take apart all the screws, and soak everything except the grips and the brass frame in vinegar and get all the bluing off of everything. And then we'll come back and antique it. And I will see you in just a minute. Everybody have to look down and have to stay down a little low here. Like I said, we're still figuring this camera out. Alright, so we got the gun pretty well completely disassembled. You do not need to soak in vinegar things like handspring, bolt and trigger spring, or any screws like that one that are inside of the gun that hold the that holds the trigger bolt spring in. And that screw has been messed up many years ago. And so it got to where when I clean this gun, I don't even take that out. I just slide the bolt and I slide the trigger out from under it. And when I'm ready to put it back, I slide them back under it because that screw is in there. Alright, so the only things that we are going to do here, we are going to go ahead and do our hammer because it's color case hardened, and I think, if I hear right, the vinegar should take off most of that color case hardening. It's not true color case hardening, it's just a chemical process they use at Pieta. Alright, next we're going to put in our loading lever. In this case, I am leaving the spring and the pin in there because that spring is tiny and that pin is tiny, and Pieta steel is fairly hard, especially on these parts, and when I drive that spring out, it never fails on these guns that I lose it. So I'm just not even going to take it out. I'm going to leave it in there. Vinegar, whole thing as it stands. Of course, there's that. We are going to go ahead and do the nipples. Can't see that. I'm going to go ahead and do those because they are visible. We're going to do the wedge. It's visible. Of course, we are going to do the cylinder. Now, you could do this after you've already ground off or sanded off the scene. It's not really going to matter. You have to do it anyway. Look at it, because there's going to be a lot of areas you're not going to get to with the sandpaper. You can do that either before or after. This time I'm going to do it before. I'll lay it in there. I'm going to go ahead and do the rest of this barrel just because of the bushing here and everything still has a lot of bluing on it. Bluing on the end. I'm just going to go ahead and put it in there. We're going to take that bluing off if at all possible. Trigger is exposed and it is blued, so we're going to take that off. We will be cutting this trigger down in order to flatten the bottom of the trigger guard. Alright, and after that, we are going to throw in and do all of the screws on the gun that are on the outside. It's about that many, because their heads will show. And when I have browned and antiqued flintlocks and things like that in the past, I usually forget to do the screws, and they're just sticking out there looking brand new while the rest of the gun looks like it's aged. So, alright, we got the loading lever catch. It's going in there. Of course, the Pieta ramrod, which is not the correct end. Historically, it would have been more steep on the inside, made for a conical, but that's not neither here nor there. I'm not going to be shooting conicals out of this gun, more than likely shooting round balls, which, by the way, if you read Elmer Keith's book Six Guns, many of the men in the Confederacy, according to him, preferred round balls over conicals because they didn't just punch through, they tended to do more damage instead of just making one hole. They tend to flatten out like a hollow point. Alright, so that's going in. Things that are not going in, like I said, hand and handspring, not going in. Mainspring, not going in. Now we will probably have to rework this mainspring, sorry, when we finish this, because like I said, we're going to have to bend this grip frame. It's probably going to make this spring a little bit too long. That's not going in. Of course, the wood's not going in. I'm probably going to make new grips. Haven't decided yet. We'll see how that works out. Back strap's not going in. Interior screw. That'll focus on it. Interior screw, hammer spring, bolt spring not going in, bolt not going in, base pin not going in. Now, we have already done some antiquing on this. Of course, it's had a lot of rounds through it, so it's already kind of antique. Now, what we did with this, you can see it's got pock marks and it's doesn't look new anymore, because it seemed like no matter what I did, if I clean this gun every time, even after about 3,000 shots, every time I clean this gun, it didn't tarnish, not like other guns. Here, let me show you an example of a tarnish gun. Take, for instance, this Spiller and Burr. Now, if you look really closely, this gun is tarnished the way I want the other gun to look like eventually, and this gun has not had near as many rounds through it as this one down here, but it's because of the top strap and the way everything works and how tight that cylinder gap is. It sprays the black powder all over the frame and ages really nicely within about, what would you say, 500 shots, 600 shots? Ages really nicely. That's what we're going for with this frame. Now the only way we've got this frame to age at all was we literally buried it in Pyrodex outside and then lit the Pyrodex on fire, and that was the only way I was able to get this Traditions gun to even slightly antique on the brass. So we might try brass black. We might try just taking Pyrodex and rubbing it with, or Pyrodex water slurry and rubbing it on it. We might see. I might just leave it the way it is. It looks pretty good to me right now. So we have everything here in our little container. It's got a little oil in the bottom of it because this is the container I use to stop the rust bluing process on my Laurel Mountain Forge rusting solution. And then we're using distilled white vinegar, just simple, great value, and we'll see how this works. Haven't even opened the bottle yet. I hate the smell of vinegar, by the way. Alright, we're just gonna lay everything down in there flat as we can get it. That oil separated real well. Alright, now, well, by the way, we did acetone a lot of these parts before I put them in there. I forgot to mention that to you. We will let these sit overnight and come back and see how well the bluing is going off of them. Now, what I'm doing here is things I've learned from Blackie Thomas's Sherman's Forge, watching his videos, so we'll see how well it works. I'll see you in the morning. Alright, good morning everybody, we're back. It's been about 7 hours, this stuff's been in the vinegar. Let's see what the results are. The results are that the oil that was still in the container and whatever little oil was inside of the parts that we did not acetone has gotten all over the outside of these, and it is sticky. But you can see there, no bluing left nearly whatsoever. There's a little bit of bluing inside where you screw the cones down. That's fine. It's going to give it that aged look to have just a little bit because of bluing in here, because of course guns that are aged and antiqued don't all wear the exact same all over. Here's the barrel assembly. I don't know if you can make that out good on the camera and the lighting, but yeah. 100% devoid of any bluing. Alright, let's see what this color case hardening did. Yeah, just kind of what I figured. There is 0 color case hardening left on this gun. It's just a chemical reaction, it's not the real thing. Places that still had oil on them, such as the backside of this hammer. Let's see if we can pick that up. Yeah, it still has a little bluing, a little color case hardening. That's fine. Want it to wear unevenly. The things that did not, for some reason, take off at all hardly, that would be the trigger. Still has almost all its bluing 100%. And from what I can tell, it looks like the screws, I'm not going to dig them out now, the screws are almost 100%. Lost their bluing. The nipples, it would appear that the nipples and the trigger still have all their bluing. That's the only things. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this steel wool and I'm going to take these pieces and I'm going to steel wool them real good, scratch them up where the vinegar can get down inside that bluing, and I'm going to leave them in for a little while longer. So anyway, that's where the progress stands now. Now it's time to start working over this cylinder, getting that seam off of there. Alright, now this next part I gotta give credit to old Duke Frazier for. Came up with this idea of putting this bushing in this bolt through the cylinder, and we're going to run it in the drill press and just run some heavy grit sandpaper around this in the drill press, and hopefully that'll be enough to just take the cylinder engraving off. We don't want to go too deep. Alright, we're going to run some 40 grit sandpaper here, and I'm just going to tear me off a piece. Doesn't have to be real precise, just width basically the cylinder. Alright, so here we are after that. As you can see, maybe you can't see. Let me shine a little light on this. Still getting this new camera and lighting system worked up, so anyway. As you can see here, no trace any longer of the naval scene. Alright. Now, just so you know, most of this scene came off with just sandpaper, but the area that had the serial number and the the area that basically had the serial number was a lot deeper engraved than the rest of the scene, so I did wind up getting out a needle file and just holding it at the right angle to that as it went around in the drill press, and it took about 5 more minutes and it came clear off. So as you can see, we have here Griswold and Gunnison cylinder. On to the next step. Okay, so we have you upside down and backwards here. At least that's the way it appears to us. Alright, now the original Griswold and Gunnison in the picture that we're taking inspiration from has a flat trigger guard, and nobody seems to do that on their replicas. So we're going to do this part that Caleb has been dreading because it's kind of ticklish. We're going to heat this brass, and I'm going to put this piece of spring steel on it at the angle that I want, and we're going to attempt to flatten the bottom of this trigger guard using this no recoil hammer on the spring steel. Probably be better if we had it there, so it's going to slip out as soon as you go to hit it. Well, we're not going to hit it real hard, but I'll try this. It's going to be on the bottom. I don't know if you're going to burn the rest of it. Now, brass melts basically at 800 degrees, so it shouldn't take much. Go ahead now. Okay, hold it. I can see we're gaining right there. Let's do that again. Hang on. Alright. We are still gaining. Just keep doing it a little at a time. Don't want to overdo it. Remember, brass is only slightly harder than lead, so it doesn't take much. And if you can see there, pretty close to what we want. And we broke it. We did? Alright, for the most tricky part now. I don't know the exact angle that these guns have their grip shaped at. So what we're going to do is we are going to attempt to just barely bend this grip just a little at a time until it looks like a Griswold and Gunnison grip. This is by far the most telling part of this whole process. We're going to change the angle here. So I'm pulling against the vise. There we go. Break that down there again. Redo that again one more time. It was holding until I did that. Okay, so what we have discovered is we did wind up cracking the trigger guard, and we're going to have to braze it back together. This metal is not, as a lot of people claim, just pure brass. There's a lot of copper alloy in this stuff. And you can heat it and heat it till it's red hot, and even then when you try to bend it, it just shatters. It's not brass. That's probably why this gun hasn't stretched even after all the thousands of rounds that have been through it, because this stuff is way harder than regular brass. Alright people, we got them bent. It was a real project. Now, it turns out, of course we already knew this, but in case you're wondering, this is not pure brass, this is an alloy, and it's basically pot metal. And so you either heat it up till it runs, and then if you try to bend it, it'll break, or if you try to cold bend it, it'll break. So after we broke it a couple times, we just decided we would take, and it's not finished yet, but we simply cut it there, and shaped it the way we wanted to with heat, and then we brazed it back together. Now it's coming right along. We flattened the bottom of the trigger guard so it looks right. We have a little bit of filling in to do. We have a lot of polishing to do on there and antiquing, but let me show you what. And by the way, spring works. It could use a little more tension, but you could shim it if you have to. You don't have to change much on the spring. Alright, let's see what this thing's starting to come together and look like. I haven't done the nipples in there yet, of course. You got that. You got that. And we'll go in there. We got that. Still locking up. Everything's fine. Took the cylinder seam off. Did have to re-ping in and dovetail slightly on that front catch. Got to put the side in. Got to finish polishing this, make some wooden grips, finish antiquing the whole thing, and should be a couple days. We should have a almost perfect Griswold and Gunnison. We'll see you next time. In the morning, hopefully. Alright everybody, look who made it back from the National Guard all in one piece. He is going to do the grip portion of the Griswold and Gunnison.
So now we're going to go ahead and we're going to make the grips for the Griswold and Gunnison. And the reason why I'm having to do some things a little differently is because the frame is a completely different dimension now. So I went ahead and I just marked it out, got a rough kind of shape that I'm going to go with for the Griswold. And what we're going to be making this out of is some walnut here, and this is actually from a tree my grandpa cut down. And we went ahead and we split it, and we've got it down into a rough shape. We're going to get it into a single block. We're going to make one single rough grip. We're then going to cut that grip in half with a hacksaw, and then we're going to glue it to this smaller piece of maple here, and that's going to be our insert in the middle, so we get kind of this right here, because I'm not that good with a chisel, especially not with walnut. So I'm going to take my farrier's rasp here. This is probably not the ideal tool for the job. I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to start taking this thing down to my line here. And the reason why I'm using the farrier's rasp is, one, you can really remove material pretty quickly with it, but also it's just, I don't know, something about working with hand tools sometimes it's just a little funner than working with the power tools. But yeah, we'll just keep on going around. I'm using the very coarse teeth right now, and you'll notice I'm only cutting with the pushing stroke of it, and we'll just keep on going on down. Let's switch here. Let's see if this one might be a little sharper. Yeah. Alright guys, so here's our new project, the Griswold and Gunnison. And we've got these grips glued on here. They're not going to be perfect. There are some small minor issues with them. I did all this inletting up here by myself using the candle black method. I got these pretty close to flush, and then we're going to have to go ahead and take these down. We're going to do it on the grips themselves because the frame here has been broken whenever we were trying to stretch it. And so it's going to need to be polished out anyways, and it'll get polished out when the grips get polished out. The only main problem I see that I didn't get quite right on here was there's going to be a little bit of daylight right there. So I don't know how well the camera will pick that up, but it's just something we're going to have to live with. But come along pretty good. Kind of gives me that Glock feeling, but we'll get it fixed. Now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take this down with this here Farrier grasp. Probably not the right tool for the job, but I like using it. Namely because I got these great big old teeth over here, and it's almost like using a bunch of little chisels. I'm just pushing kind of gently on the forward stroke. And I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to take this down quite a bit. The reason why I'm doing this is because, one, I run into I'm a lot less likely to really booger up the grips than I would be with a power tool. And two, I don't know, there's just something about it. And it actually can take off quite a bit of material pretty quickly, but I have more control over it.
Alright everybody, thought we'd stop here and give you a little look-see at how the progress is going. This is probably, let's see, what are we on? Week 2. Week 2 of this project. It's been quite a while. Alright, so this is what we got. We're rough shape. We do have it fit to the brass all the way around. And fits pretty good. We got to do a little more polishing on the grip, but let's take a look at what she's going to look like all together here. Now it's taken us a while to do these grips, but if you were to do it from a pre-dimensioned walnut board, you'd probably be better off. But you got to remember, we took these grips all the way from tree to this, and this was a tree our grandpa cut down, so that'll always have a special place in our heart. But can't see it right there. She's coming right along. We got the flat trigger guard, the bent grip, the round barrel, no navy seam on the cylinder. Coming right along. Next step, finish polishing the grips out. Give them a little bit of linseed oil. We should be getting close to done.
Tapered it.
Alright. Well everybody, at long last, here we are, and it is done. It only took 3 people. It only took a 18th century revolutionary, a 19th century cowboy, and a 20th century lumberjack. Alright, let's start with the lumberjack. Alright, Caleb, you took this into the shop where you work, and what did you do, very first thing?
I had my boss check it up so it was perfect. And then I lathed it down. Well, I had to finish up the checking it up. And then I lathed it down and tapered it.
Yeah, so you started here and it's tapered just ever so slightly all the way to the end. And when he brought it back, I wound up the tapers, of course, because he did this with a hand tool on a lathe, so they were a little rough. So when he brought it back, I sanded it a lot, buffed it down to where that taper is gradual and smooth. Then after that, I took the whole thing, all the blued parts, soaked them in vinegar, and it removed the bluing super fast. You saw that in the previous part of the video. And after that, I took Laurel Mountain Forge browning solution, which is a very super aggressive rust browning solution, and I gave it a real heavy coat. I hung it on my shower curtain and turned the steam on, and I got it steamed up good, shut the shower off, and left it set for 12 hours until it was a bright red rust. When I carted all the rust off and I killed it with used motor oil, soaked the whole thing in used motor oil, and then I came back with some Birchwood Casey Super Blue, and I mixed it to one whole bottle of Birchwood Casey Super Blue to one drinking water bottle. And I watered it down, and that gives us this gray antique color. Now the reason we did an antique was because I knew we could never rematch that bluing with cold blue unless we did a hot blue, and I didn't really want to do that. And besides that, all the original pictures you see of Griswold andGunnisons are either they didn't ever have bluing to begin with, or the bluing is long gone, and so I thought this would be a good idea. Also, I took and I dinged up around the wedge here. I just took a hammer and I tapped around there and made some dents, because I've never seen an original gun of any kind that didn't have at least 5 or 6 good dents right around that wedge. And anyway, after that I attempted to bend the grips, and I'm here to tell you right now, this stuff is not actually brass. It's more like a pot metal. It's very strong, I guess, but when you try to heat it to bend it, it runs very easily, and when you let it cool, it tends to just crack and break. And so I tried that several different times, and what I succeeded to do was I broke the trigger guard, I broke this back strap, I couldn't get it done. So what I finally did was I took a hacksaw and I cut this grip here, 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 and on the trigger guard, and then set them back in the places I wanted, and then had Caleb here come and we brazed it, because he's pretty good with that kind of stuff, and we brazed this whole grip back into the shape it needed to be. We heated and flattened the trigger guard, because most original Griswold andGunnisons that you see will have a flattened trigger guard. We could have got more carried away with it and flattened the front, but like I said, this stuff is very difficult to work with, so we settled for just flattening the bottom of the trigger guard.
We just broke it and then fixed it.
We broke it and then we fixed it. Like I said, you have to cut it in 3 places to get this right, and then braze it back together. And then you have to file, of course, all your brazing off and everything. Alright, after that, we had an antique gun. I did forget to mention that Duke Frazier was the one that came up with a lot of these ideas. I chucked this on a bolt, the cylinder, stuck it in the drill press, put some sandpaper up to it. It took about 6 seconds to get rid of that navel seam. Now, the part that had the engaged and the patent date on it, that was a little more difficult. I did have to wind up putting a heavier sandpaper on there and scratching that off, but put it back in the drill press, buffed it up, took that seam off fairly easily. After that, this is when Ethan got back from doing his National Guardy things, and tell us what you did.
So what I did was we had to make some pistol grips, and so what I ended up doing was I took some walnut from a tree that my grandpa cut down, a local black walnut tree. Had some nice figure to it. I went ahead and I took a solid block, and I started to shape that block down with a farrier's rasp into the general shape that I wanted it. Now whenever I got pretty close to the shape that I wanted, we went ahead and we ripped it with the hacksaw. We were doing this mostly traditional. We did some with the belt sander, but we tried to stick with files and chisels, and it actually it worked out really good. So once I got that solid piece ripped in half, I went ahead and I took my individual pieces and I smoked them, which for those of you who don't know is where you take a candle or a lantern or something and you get the black on the gun, and then you go and you get the grip in there and you push it in, and wherever you see black, that's where you need to take your chisel and make a little swipe and kind of cut it out of there. I did that. The engraving worked out beautifully, the inletting worked out beautifully. We then went and took a piece of maple. We cut it out to the shape of the center of the grip frame. We put it in there. We put some glue on both ends, sandwiched them together in the vise, glued them, let it sit overnight. Once it did that, we went ahead and we formed it the rest of the way on the gun, because this is a brass frame gun. It didn't really matter. We can just polish the brass up. So we went ahead, we reformed it, and I then went and once I got it formed good enough to the way I wanted it, we sanded it down, polished it up, and then I applied linseed oil. I did 2 coats pretty quickly after each other, and I was rubbing them in by hand pretty fast. And then I went ahead and I did a little technique I've learned to make it turn really dark. I went and I took some linseed oil that I'd set out and let dry for a little bit, and it turns into almost like a jelly. I went ahead and I pulled some of that off of there, and I just rubbed for about an hour, and it turned those grips really dark. And it came out, and it worked out really good. So yeah.
And by the way, these grips are 100% better than anything Pieta puts out. I can just tell you that right now. They fit better, they're tighter, it just feels 100% better. I don't know what kind of wood they use. It's probably some kind of walnut, but this black walnut, especially since it's connected to our family and my grandpa cut the tree down not just a couple months ago. It was already dead. That's the reason we were able to pull this off. It really is important to us. So like I said, overall view, took the what we did to make this Griswold and Gunnison, took the scene off cylinder, turned the barrel around, flattened the trigger guard, and most importantly, bent the, well, didn't actually, cut and reshape the grip frame. Now this did cause an issue, and I didn't think it would at first. It did cause an issue with the mainspring being too light. So what I've basically done is we took and I straightened that mainspring out a little bit, you know, heated it up, did everything we needed to do, get it back to the same hardness and kneel and all that kind of thing, and it just straightened it. So now it's not quite as heavy, I would say, as a standard, but we have run caps through it and it'll set them off. Now I'm not sure when we go to shoot this, it might still be too light, and it might wind up blowing the hammer back like a 49 pocket model. I'm not sure yet. If it does, I'm just going to do the old Mark Hubbs trick of putting another spring right there on top of the one that's already there. He does that for 49 pocket models. I think it'll work for this. I don't think that's even going to be an issue though, because this is a fairly heavy hammer. By the way, when we had this apart, we deburred everything, cleaned everything up, and
Thing has maybe a pound. That trigger probably is maybe a pound.
the back of this gun had 3,000 rounds through it before we started. This is an old gun that I've had and shot. It's never shot loose, but what did wear out was some of the internals. The bolt where it runs on the cam, about every 500 rounds tends to wear off and not catch. And the cam's perfectly fine. It never has changed. It's really hard steel on that hammer. It's so hard, I think it wears out the bolt before anything else. But anyway, like I said, we've shot this so much that the back of the triggers wore down, and it really, if I put this on a gauge, it would be about a 6-ounce trigger. So I actually kind of like that for this gun, though, because it makes it super accurate. I like to shoot it that way.
It goes off before you're ready.
No. Anyway, so if you want to try to do this, I'll tell you, this is not a job probably for the faint of heart. You're going to get into this. Of course, you're going to need a lathe, a metal lathe, or a mill. You're going to need to cut your grip frame and be able to have the ability to braze it all back together right. And thankfully, that's why we got Lumberjack here, or else we would have never pulled that off. He's really good with metalworking. And of course, you can do the standard antiquing. Anybody can do that. But you're also going to have to be able to work with wood, because you're going to have to make a new set of grips to fit this bent frame. Overall though, I am super impressed with how this came out. I can't believe I didn't do all that much to it. I came up with the idea. I kind of overseen the bending of the grips, but Caleb did the metal work, Ethan did the woodwork. I just antiqued it, and I am super impressed with how this came out. This is probably one of the few bent frame Griswold andGunnisons you'll probably see shot until somebody starts making one. Anyway, that finally finishes this video. We will come back and shoot this gun eventually, but this is the how-to. Alright, we'll come back just for one more second. I forgot to mention, in case you're wondering, this is the grip difference. This is my standard 51 Navy by Pieta, and if you look, I got the trigger guards pretty well lined up right there. You can see the back of this grip sticks out. Let's just set them on flat. If you set it flat, hold that gun up there, please. Okay, that one is sitting flat on the back of the grip, and that's that one sitting flat on the back of the grip. So that is the difference in the grip right there, you can see. And of course, if you look closely, you'll see the difference in the trigger guards. Let me hold them up there one more time. Alright, so that's it. That's all we have for this video. This is the do-it-yourself. Anyway, thanks for watching.
Keep your powder dry.
See you later.